The session is recorded. Okay, just give me 1 minute. The person just check what is the problem with the stream.
All right.
Okay, I think Tapas, you can start, and I will look into the issue for.
Sure. All right. So I'll get started. I'll share my screen. Just need a confirmation that you are able to see my screen. Yeah, I've shared just now. All good? Able to see my screen?
No, not yet. As of now.
Not yet?
About to see.
Yep, it's appeared now.
It should be there by now.
Yep, it's there now.
Now?
There?
I can see it.
You can see it? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it's there. Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll get started. So thank you everyone for joining the session on JAMstack. So I named the session like, JAMstack for all because I was completely unaware of JAMstack some time back, and then all of a sudden I had to do it and implemented it in a product that I was working on. I was architecting, and I felt like, if I could learn that and make my team ramp up on this. So possibly this is for everyone, the JAMstack, and the concept probably can be learned very, very sooner, and we can make it in practice. So before we go there, I'll quickly introduce myself. So this is Tapas. I'm based out of Bangalore. People who knows Bangalore already, I'm in the electronic city part, and I'm working in a company called Microfocus as an UI architect and UI manager. Passionate about UI UX and an independent blogger. So that's kind of pretty much at a high level about me. So if you want to reach out, you can reach out to my Twitter, which the handle mention is there at the end of the slide that I'll show today. Right. So with that, I'll get started. I'll share my slide now. Just let me know if you're able to see my slide.
Yes, visible?
Yes.
Can you wait for 5 minutes? Sorry. Please wait for another 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just sharing this live stream. So let's wait for the other people to join in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. Maybe in the meantime, you can read the strings, in this jam bottle.
Yep. Okay, we can start now. I've shared the link on the channels.
Good to go?
Yep.
All right. Sure. All right.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you. So the agenda is a bit lengthy. So what we'll get started with a bit of history, and then we'll also discuss about kind of what and why Jamstack, and then I feel that there is a requirement of some sort of mindset before we jump into a Jamstack implementation, and then a difference between a traditional versus Jamstack and where and how they are different. We'll also talk about few myths around Jamstack. It's important to clarify those because there are few misconceptions that got built. Then we'll talk about technology ecosystem. We'll also talk about the server side of things in Jamstack, and then we'll run through a few examples. I'll talk about the workflow, like how things happen, and at the end of the slide, I have few resources that I have curated and try to follow and go to them whenever there is a need. So I posted those as well, and we'll also go through some of the question answers, right? All right, so a bit of history to start with. So this is not the history of Jamstack. Rather, we'll talk about this in history of web development or the web architecture at a very, very high level, right? That will help us to set our mindset, like why Jamstack is coming into picture and why people are talking about it. So long ago, basically, people used to build site. I'm talking about really long ago, like where is the static HTML, and the static HTML mostly content based. um, it doesn't have much of dynamic things in it. People load that on browser and things used to run. So that is more about the website kind of era, long back. And then some amount of dynamicism came, like people wanted things bit dynamic way. The inclusion of JavaScript, wanted to click a button, want some sort of things to happen, changing color of something with CSS. Not so long ago, like this kind of paradigm that came into picture, right? What we still follow today is like the as a mostly modern, that's what I say, like many of the our web architecture, like you have a browser, and then you have a web server. The web server serves you JavaScript, HTML, CSS once you request for it. There could be another application server behind, which have the business logic. In some application, these two can be clubbed into one, a particular server which serving your business logic and is having your pages. Also, the pages are nothing but HTML, CSS, and you may or may not have a database interaction. It could be database, it could be a file system, it could be any other store that you will be storing your data with. So if we see, like at a high level, these are the different kind of paradigm that we have been through or we are already using right now. What exactly happen is, like if we need any sort of, say, add-on or any sort of extra stuff. So for example, people who are using Express, they need something like a middleware. They need this particular add-on to be added into the Express server, right? So similarly, if you're on the database, you need a particular support, you probably need to add that add-on or the plugin into that particular database. Same thing applies for application server. Same thing applies for browser even, right? I'm keeping the browser out because my justification for Jamstack is more about simplifying this layer, and that in turns kind of impact things positively over here. So we have this kind of baggage of maintaining, managing, putting the different kind of add-ons and the plugins to make our requirement ongoing. And who does this most of the cases, right? It is we who do this. If you are working in an enterprise organization, you have certain VMs or you have certain servers, and you are actually patching them, you are actually maintaining them, you are actually deploying them. If you have a database, you are doing the same thing for this one. So it is you who is doing it. If you were talking about certain things like WordPress, for example, which we phenomenally use for our website development, website content, and basically keeping the content, everything that also follows almost similar kind of model. It has a some database at the back end, and you have presentation layer, and then you keep your file or the content in certain structure. That logic is that the philosophy is kind of same, right? Now, while we are doing this, or we have been doing this web application architecture, there are three very critical points that we always keep in mind, right? One point is the security, right? So today people are so much security concerned than ever before, that everything that you talk about to a customer or an end user, the security comes into picture first, right? How do you manage that basically? Second is the cost, right? By cost, it means it is not only about the resources that are working for a particular project, it also about all the hardware, software, etc., that you are purchasing, how you are making the build of your product, how you are deploying the product, how it is reaching the customer, the end-to-end cost factor. And the last but not the least is the speed, right? Very important, specifically in the industry like retail. you know it requires to be in the early second, is the first second, that everything should be loaded, your customer should get the feeling of it, there is no lag, no frustrations for customers at all. Now the architecture that we have, I have showed you so far, they try to encompass all of this factor. They try to encompass security, cost, and the speed. All of this is not bad, but it at times it fails somewhere. Like, so how it can fail somewhere is like the possible impact point. You yourself or your organization has to manage multiple servers, because if you're doing it by yourself, maybe a server for your application server somewhere, another one you have deployed for your web application for serving the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript file, multiple team members maintaining them, and in between there is a poor manager, one or more. They're kind of managing those cost, budget, etc., pulling of it. Right. This is a story of our office, our enterprise, our product team. If we go like as an end user now, maybe I want to build a website using WordPress. WordPress is doing all these things that we are doing in our office, in our organization. Now WordPress is doing, but as WordPress is doing, this is also creating a single point of failure. So if the WordPress database is down, if WordPress is not able to serve, its application server is down, its web server is down, the end user impact is more. If all the HTML and JavaScript are served based on every request that goes over network and come via response, the start of your application is bit slower, right? And what you get probably end of the day, in this fast moving time, some of these phases, right? And you don't want your user to have this kind of phases. So with this history in mind, we start looking into JAMstack. Now keep in mind, please, JAMstack is not going to solve all the problems, but it is going to give you certain open door. If you now tweak that, twist it, or do a proper exercise of that, you probably will be able to achieve all those three pillars much better way, right? So that is what this particular session is about. So let's start with the definition, as we do for everything. What is JAMstack? This is a pure definition. It's perfectly fine if you kind of don't get too much into it. Like, it's a modern web development architecture. So this is a vital point. It's an architecture. It's not It's not a technology, which is based on client-side JavaScript. So you're not talking about server-side JavaScript like Node or things like that yet. It's client-side JavaScript. Reusable APIs. It means that somebody has created an API that will be using as a consumer, or we create, somebody else will be using, and pre-built markup. So this is a very important word called pre-built. It means that the presentation layer, the view layer, the HTML, CSS is kind of pre-built. It is, there are some tooling, there are some methodology through which is built prior your any kind of deployment, right? Now we'll break it down further to see, like, what exactly it is. uh, if you are familiar with Jamstack already, you would have seen this kind of Venn a lot. People use. I am also using for the similar reason, because it's very clear. What exactly JavaScript? We are all familiar that it's a client side front end library or framework that is supported by JavaScript. I'll be repeating the term client side because that's what make more sense for JAMstack, you can handle request response cycle, and just with vanilla JavaScript, or you can actually get any other frameworks or library that are based on JavaScript in the JAMstack era. A is for API. It's like which abstract the server side processes or any kind of DB actions. CRUD operation, like create, read, update, and delete. Access to what HTTPS with JavaScript or any other third party or kind of custom built methodologies. And last but not the least is the markup, which is the face of the application or face of this particular architecture, which is a templated markup. Note this term templated, we'll revisit later. Templated markup to be pre-built at deploy time. If we are talking about websites, there are plenty of site generators that can be used for building this pre-built markup. We'll see those in details. If it is a kind of app which is little more than a site, there are build tools which can do it. That also will kind of go ahead and see it. So this clarify the definition, I believe, for the JAMstack. Now, one thing to remember and one thing to put in your mind, that JAMstack is not a technology, it's a concept or it's an architecture, right? So we have been through a few stacks already, right? This is not the first time you're talking about stack. Long back, maybe around early 2000 or before that, LAMP stack was really, really famous, right? We used to develop, people who were there in that era for development of website, they know that PHP, MySQL, Apache, and Linux were the favorite thing in the LAMP stack. There was no competitor as such that time. Then things evolved. We used to do a lot of stuff in the back end. Then we started doing all those small architectural pieces in the UI itself. Let it be, MVP, MB star, whatever it is, and that evolved few more stack like Min stack, where you have Angular. As a technology, you can do a lot of stuff. It has its own MVC paradigm. You do your app development. Then you can have at the back end, you have your node server, and Express is another awesome server based on node. And then you have MongoDB, right? A similar thing is MERN, is like you have Mongo Express, and instead of Angular you just have React and you have Node. But when you talk about JAMstack, I'm not mentioning any technologies. I'm not mentioning about Mongo, Express, Node, Angular, React whatsoever. Talking about three very basic paradigm, which is like JavaScript, which API, and the markup, right? So this is what exactly we are going to see, like how it will evolve. Now, few prerequisites before you jump into JAMstack implementation, and some of these things are taken from my own experiences. So it might differ, when you read an article or a blog outside of it, but these are some of the experiences that I had. So of course, on very known prerequisites is like a JAMstack says that your entire app is on a CDN or an ADN. So what is CDN and what is ADN? So CDN is, as we know, is like content delivery network. So for example, you want to use jQuery as a library. There are various ways you can use jQuery. You can download jQuery, the .js file. You can keep it in a folder, source it in your index.html file, and you can use it. Or you can do through npm way, or you can actually take the URL from the CDN. So jQuery is already there, as a file as a content in some of the delivery network on your network. You can actually give that URL directly, that internet URL, the HTTPS URL of jQuery, and fetch the jQuery from there. So this is just an example. Now, when you're talking about a particular library, you can actually extrapolate that particular things for an application. So content delivery network can be seen as an application delivery network. Just how you fetch jQuery from network, you can actually fetch an application also. So entire app is on CDN and ADN. I have slides where we'll be discussing about what is CDN, what is the benefit of it very quickly. Automatic deploys. So it means the moment you change your codes get built. There is something which triggers a deployment of it, so that it can be served to others. So deploying to your CDN so that it can be served to your customers instantly. Instant cache validation, so that to make sure that your customers or your users are not seeing the stale data, so that the cache validation happen, and it has to be taken care by someone. Everything lives on Git so far, so this is I would say like for its continuous integration part or continuous delivery part of the JAMstack, Git is a very important paradigm over there. So you code your code lives on Git. You push the code on Git, and there is a workflow kind of thing that we'll see that gets started to take care of rest of the pieces. Automated builds, like whenever you push a code, builds get generated, then automatic deploy happen. We actually discuss about that. Practically serverless. So it says that now this is where probably some confusion comes with JAMstack. Is like when you talk about JAMstack, there are many places we read like JAMstack is serverless. Yes, it is practically serverless. You actually can build JAMstack with there is no server required whatsoever, right? But is it truly serverless? We'll see that down the line. And then, as I was saying, that this is just an architecture. Now you need your open mind to explore further, twist it, tweak it in the way that suits your need and your organization need, right? So these are the prerequisites before you jump into a application which you want to translate to JAMstack or want to start from scratch. Okay, a quick view on what exactly CDN is, right? I'll quickly try to explain. So consider this. I believe this slide is visible. It's a bit blurred. So these are your users. Now consider these are us, right? And I want to fetch certain content from a server which is located over here, some centralized server. Now I am in Bangalore and this server is in US. If I try to fetch a content, it has some kind of lag time, some kind of cold start to get this particular content to me. What if the provider of this server already recognized the fact that wherever I lives in Bangalore, it probably has a content delivery network somewhere near to me, maybe somewhere in Calcutta, which is far more easily reachable from the speed wise than I'm going over to US and fetching it, right? So that's very high level. That's basically the purpose of a CDN server. That's what it does. It means it reduces the distance between a user and the website resources. Now we have been using the term CDN for website. I want you to do a little bit mind shift that we'll be talking about for app also from now onwards, right? It is not about a particular content. Maybe a majority portion of your app is also can be deployed into this CDN network so that your users, your customers can be served so fast than actually reaching out to the origin server, which might be located very far, right? Apart from this fact, this is the primary reason, and JAMstack actually recommends that this is how it should be, because speed is one of the factor that has to be considered in JAMstack, right? There are a few other things that you can do is like can reduce the amount of data that transfer through minification, and also can also be speed up your site if it uses the TLS SSL certificates. So if it's an HTTPS, it is going to be much better. So that's a very high level about CDN. If you want to go ahead and read more about CDN, there is a website from where I have picked up this particular picture. You can go ahead and read about it. But I hope you got the idea about CDN. Now imagine this image like an application delivery network. CDN or ADN is distributed across various places on the globe, and based on the hits that we are getting from the customer space, we can actually serve the content from the CDN, which is much in close proximity to that particular customers or users. All right, so we know about CDN now. We know about the speed factor that will be taking care of it. I think it's the time we actually get into the fact of doing a small comparison between a traditional architecture workflow, which I have showed already in the beginning, and the JAMstack workflow, right? So the workflow comparison will first lay out the traditional piece. We have seen this already, and we know it very well. So in the traditional case, a developer writes a code. He probably pushing the code into a repository, no matter what. But what the developer will do, he will have some kind of build script into his project. Using that, he will be building the actual artifact of this particular project. It could be a war file, or could be ER file or whatnot, something that can be shipped. Now, what will happen is like that particular app or that particular output content or the war file or whatever it is can be deployed into a web server. There could be another application server also. in the back of it. And when user actually hook for a particular website or a particular URL, based on what exactly user is asking for, it will dynamically generate that particular HTML in the server and is going to serve this to user, right? This is what at a very high level traditionally happen. Now, to make this process more faster, what we can do, we can actually make sure that we use of caching. Who implements this? Developer implements, right? The caching part of it over here. Security, there is a new security vulnerability found on this particular operating system. Who is to do it? The developer is going to do this particular patching. So whatever basically around this area that has to be done, like load balancing and other things that a developer has to do, or somebody else who is in this particular project has to do this work. So this is about the traditional part. Now, how JAMstack will be a little bit different than this is like same developer's code, but instead of shipping the entire application to a server, what developer he ships a pre-built files to CDN. We know what CDN is. It is different than the origin server. It is more close to your users, right? And this is the term that you need to keep in mind. Pre-built. It's pre-built thing we are actually serving. And then what user gets is a pre-built HTML. There is no dynamic way of generating the HTML from here and kind of putting over the pre-built HTML whenever it was asked for. Now, each of this layer will break into in terms of JAMstack going forward. And we'll see like, how it is feasible. And then also we'll see what is the downside of it, right? So, be with me on this. So this is the comparison between a traditional and the JAMstack way of looking into things. Almost similar thing, but as Netlify recommends, what JAMstack is than a monolithic architecture, I thought of kind of quickly go through it. So you have your browser in the JAMstack, you have your CDN or ADN. We probably will be using the term ADN from now because it's an application delivery network from where your application is getting served. And you have APIs to get the various usage based on your need, right? So markup deployed at the build time, API call from the browser. Browser is the runtime, and there is no server, no web server actually involved at all. So that's where we kind of keep hearing that JAMstack is serverless. Yeah, practically it is. In terms of monolithic app, we have seen already, like you have a browser, you have a CDN, and then you have to build this load balancer. There could be other layers for security and things like that. You have a DB, you have a web server, and there could be many other facets, right? Now, JAMstack, whether there is no web server, there is no serverless, there are few factors that come into picture where you can say practically I don't need a server at all, or there may be a server need. We'll try to see that, very quickly. So let's talk about what is engineers benefit for this, like what is benefit for us, you, me, by doing JAMstack. One is like the delegation of server side and the database operation. We say that we actually removing. So we're telling that JAMstack is serverless here. So we are removing the server side and the database operation. So it means that we are actually focusing on the business logic which you're supposed to write. And as we are removing it, we are actually removing the chances and spending time on fixes for point of failure, security exploits kind of thing. So that's a benefit for us. Like we are focusing on our technology, the business logic. Static content can be served by a CDN, which is like super user experience because it's fast. We have already seen this. Less complexity of development, of course, reduces cost. The manager, the CIO, whoever kind of involved in that, they're more happy because it reduces cost for the organization. Dev, build, test is and deploy is a very important cycle, right? Often these are different people who does it, like a developer guy, there is a CM guy who build it, there is a QA who test it, and there is a deployment guy maybe who finally deploying it in a traditional situation. And sometimes the communication between these guys, it falls through crack. There could be a lot of problems, on the production time. So these are the things kind of well managed in JAMstack because tools take care of most of this complexity. Okay, quickly to talk about a few myths that what JAMstack is not, to keep in mind. If you're already using JAMstack, you're probably aware of it, but if you're not, there is a myth that is only for websites. It is not. only for static apps and the sites. It is not, because I'm using it for enterprise app now. Enterprise app will not scale with it. It's actually reverse. It really scales with it. JAMstack is React.js based. It is not. You can use React, Angular, Vue, Slate, vanilla JavaScript, anything for your J part. But there is a strong ecosystem around React.js from the tooling perspective. That's why there is a word of mouth that JAMstack is, the J part is React for JAMstack. GitOps is a new thing. So people who are already aware about DevOps, for them, GitOps is not the new thing, right? In terms of DevOps, you have to have a paradigm of kicking off a build and then take the output of that build artifact. You have to put it somewhere in the deploy. Now it will happen through a lot of tools, and it will happen things automatically. So, but there is nothing as such new in the GitOps. But this is a term that it is associated with JAMstack. So thought of clarifying that. Learning curve for Kiwi. I'm not sure if in this session there is someone from the quality engineering or quality assurance team. But if you're hearing me also later, it's like there is no exponentially change learning curve. Actually, there is no learning curve. Basically, what you got to learn is like maybe certain tools. That's all, and there is nothing else, right? Jamstack can reduce jobs. It means that you are going to lose job if your company is adapting to Jamstack. I have seen it reverse. It reskilled people. It skilled people in a way that it empowered them lot more than they were doing before, right? So it doesn't reduce job. It probably open up your job opportunities. Quickly talk about few technologies that are associated with it. I have already spoken about it. Like front end could be any J based, anything JavaScript based, but these are the things that probably leading the term. Now, for a moment, let's keep any of the enterprise application away. Let's talk about websites through which the Jamstack had started. In the year of 2015. So there is an ecosystem of static site generators. What exactly it is? It is basically helps you. You remember the term called pre-built markup? It helps you to generate those pre-built markup, right? It has a technology. It has that mechanism that it can look into your code. It can look into your HTML code. It can look into your CSS code, JavaScript code, and at the build time, it built something which is like everything mashed around, and it's a pre-built markup that you get to deploy at the end to a CDN. So there are various static site generators. That there is a website called staticsitegenerators.com. I have given that link in my resources. So these are few to name with. There's a Hugo. There is something called Gatsby, which is React.js based. I like this. I've been using that a lot. There's Next.js. There's Next. There's Jekyll. So a bunch of things are already there. This is only few. If you go to staticsitegenerators.com, you will be able to see there are plenty, and so always sorted by number of downloads, usage kind of stuff, right? The primary use case is same, but the syntax and the coding paradigm is different from one to another, and each of these are kind of backed by one of the technology. For example, Gatsby by React, that kind of stuff. There is another concept that's called headless CMS, right? So if you're talking about a website, you will be definitely building certain content, right? Your website cannot be blank, or it cannot be just image. You will be having an about page, probably. You will be having your blogs, maybe. You will be having your contact page, whatnot. So these are all contents. So it means this contents has to reside somewhere, right? Somewhere it can be there, so that from where it can be pulled out, and there should be somebody who will be able to manage this particular content, these contents. So that's where the CMS comes into picture. Why it is headless? Because we have already answered for the head part, which is the UI part, which is like React, Vue, and all these things. So you don't need a head into the CMS, which WordPress also gives. If you're building a website using WordPress, it also gives methodology to build that UI using WordPress. You don't need it here because you have already going with one of the technology. So that's the reason it is headless. What it does, it's just the content management. Your content can reside in Git, and what is going to do, it's just going to manage those. It means if something is updated, deleted, edited, it's going to manage that entire life cycle. We'll see that a demo with Netlify CMS towards the end. So there are a bunch of headless CMS is there. Again, if you go to headlesscms.com, you have the similar website like static site generator. These are few to name with. I have used so far is Netlify CMS, Sanity Contentful, Strappy, but others I have not got a chance. But you can actually go ahead and start looking into them. There are few websites that you can see from netlify.com slash websites or the examples site. For example, this particular website is built in Vue.js. Vue is the EY side of it, the J side of it. Next is like a static site generator, and then you have this cloud technology, and then you have this Octopus for deploy. So again, you see the paradigm, the methodology has been given more attention, and then you can actually select any of the technology that you know already, right? You don't have to really try something which you are not aware of. This is another one which is based on Hugo. Hugo is another static site generator. You have Netlify for your CMS purpose, Git where you are keeping the content, Discuss is for user to comment. You can actually embed those commenting purposes. Do you have any question now? I'll just take a pause and try to get, because I have gone through a lot of theory, and I want to take some quick questions before I move further.
Hi Tapas, Akshay here. I have one question in the last two examples that you gave. So in the second last example, you mentioned that probably React is part of it, or I believe Vue was there. I can't see it. Yes. So Vue is part of here, and probably Nuxt is used to generate the static site.
Yes.
But in the last example, there is no such UI framework use. So I'm confused in that, as in why in one there is a framework used, UI, and then a static site generator, and in the second one, the Hugo one, there is no UI framework used.
Yeah,
So,
excellent question. Yeah, excellent question. Right. So in this one, let's take it in this way, that the developer, I don't know him, but the developer who actually selected this as a technology, this as a technology stack, but he would have selected to create certain components with Vue.js. Right, he would have created maybe his home page, or in the home page a little bit of a particular component he would have selected. That is where the flexibility of this particular stack comes. Nobody stops you from selecting anything. Now instead of Vue, he could have gone ahead with React.js and Gatsby, where Gatsby would have done the same job of taking care of building the React code along with certain MD files. MD files are like nothing but the markdown files where you write your content, and Gatsby would have come together to build those React component and the MD file together along with GraphQL, and then create your pre-built content. That is where he probably, instead of going through the React and Gatsby, he would have gone through Next, and he would have created certain components using Vue. That's completely his choice. Whereas in the second one, this particular person, where he would have created all his content using Hugo, he has used Netlify for the CDN purpose, which we'll see in the example. He would have used Netlify for your continuous deployment purpose, and he would have used Git for your continuous integration purpose, right? Where he will be creating the content. And then the Discuss, because he had a special need that I think this is a VS Code extension, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So he has a special need that a customer who is coming to this site, they can actually comment, on certain blog that this person has written. That's what his technology selection is completely different. My personal website, I have developed it using React.js and Gatsby and Netlify, because I am actually creating those small component of my website using React. Gatsby is helping them to do a pre-built markup. Netlify is taking care of the CD part, the continuous deployment part. And I hardly use Netlify CMS because it's a very single page website. I don't have any blog and all there, so I don't use the CMS to manage my content as such. And Git is where I have my all other code repository. So it's completely based on the need. Hope that answered the question.
So basically, my question technically was, with Hugo, there is no UI framework mentioned as such, but there Vue was mentioned, right?
Right.
So
yeah. Right.
So that's what my question was. There should be one UI framework with the Hugo example
probably
as well.
Yes. Yeah, probably yes. Because
yeah, that was my question.
As I was telling, that this screenshot was taken from the Netlify examples. In the examples, they haven't mentioned. So I don't know what exactly the UI framework he would have used.
So it means that there is always one UI framework and something that converts it to static site generator.
Yes.
There will always be a combo of these two.
Always the combo of these two. And the first one, I'll just correct it a little bit. There is always a UI framework you told. It could be a vanilla JavaScript also, not necessarily a UI framework.
Okay. Either a framework or the vanilla thing.
Yes.
So one follow-up question on this, like, as in, because we come from a traditional thought perspective, and I'm trying to break that in my mind and
Sure.
figure out, as in create an image in my mind. So all the application logic that we put in our backend, and the database that we connect to. So where does this go in this kind of architecture? Where does it sits?
Awesome question. Awesome. Just hold on your thought. My next slide is going to answer that.
Okay.
Any other question?
Yeah, hi, this is Santosh here.
Hi, Santosh.
So I just wanted to know, like,
Yeah.
hello.
Your voice got cut off in between.
Yeah, hi, Abhinav here. Abhinav.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, just wanted to know that you told me, you told us that caching is mandatory for JAMstack, right? Like you have to implement that whole caching thing. Yeah, so just wanted to know that there can be like two caching levels, like one from the CDN side itself, because a CDN is a lot of involved in this whole stack.
Right.
Yeah, so just wanted to know how would we regulate those things, like from the CDN side and from the application side itself, the header side.
Right. Good question. So whatever happened in the application side is completely in our hand, and that is it's been done traditionally, and it will be done traditionally. There is no change in that at all. Now, whatever happening in the CDN side, whereas CDN side, it is making sure that whatever the data or whatever the response it is serving, it is not still. That's where these different providers come into picture, right? In the whole JAMstack paradigm, it is very, very often, I have not heard, at least in my cycle, that anybody build their own CDN, right? Either they have used the CDN provider which are coming up, like Netlify is one of the example, or maybe a cloud provider, right? Maybe something from the AWS, something from GCP, Google Cloud provider. They are already taking care of these things. So let's not reinvent the wheel. And I will be touching this point towards the end, that what we have calculated and we have proven also that managing a server for and managing a resource along with that in-house is way costly than going for a provider like that who is doing all the services for you and charging less penny, right? So your second version of your cache validation, cache invalidation is done by a CDN provider who is already doing it. You don't have to really break your head there. But in the application side, whatever you are doing as a caching methodology so far, that you can continue doing. So there is no change in that, at least from the stack perspective.
Yeah, so we were actually using the same thing, that we were actually depending on the CDN itself. Okay, we were using Cloudflare, but what we actually saw that caching was being done on the ISP basis somewhere. Right. Okay, a lot of parts in the world. Okay. So we had to actually override that with our server itself. Like we had to create our own version system where we would like force update those websites. Yes. Okay, so like if there is not a server involved and in general, like not a centralized thing, so how would we do that in general?
So yeah,
because
so
I and like purge all the things, है ना? Do
I think your voice is breaking. Can you just repeat that last part? I'm not sure if it's only with me or others are also hearing.
Yeah, same here.
Even after we purge cache from the CDN, right? Still the ISPs cache some of the data.
Right.
Yeah.
So
we used to like manually override that via server. Yeah. So how does it work in JAMstack?
Yeah. So in the JAMstack, there is no recommendation of like how you have to do this cache invalidation. That's what I was coming to. Now you could do various different ways. Probably you are doing through versioning. You can do some kind of unique timestamping or whatever the methodology that you want to take, right? Now, whatever the provider that are coming up with from the CDN side, they will have their own mechanism to do it. On top of that, if you see like the very typical example you have given, right? This particular example side, from the application development point of view, you have to take care. You have to take that extra step, And that step is completely your own methodology. The way that you told, how are you doing? You're doing it through the versioning way. How are you managing that? Yeah. So if I have to do probably versioning, yes, if I have to do, my methodology could be something else. It could be completely different. So JAMstack doesn't dictate like how it has to be done. All right. So I'll just.
Tapas?
Okay. Thank you.
Good.
Let's continue with the presentation. We'll
Hello.
take questions at
Yeah,
the
I'll give
later moment.
another break. Yeah, I'll give another break for questions. I just wanted to take this
And
one.
for the audience who have questions, you can just post your questions in the chat box or on the Discord server. We'll have a look and we'll disturb Tapas at the end of the presentation for all the questions.
Awesome. Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll move on. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for the great questions. So, what about the server? Just now we actually discussed that where exactly my server goes, where exactly my DB goes. What we have seen already is this, right? I have been through this slide once. Like in the architecture, we are saying that we have browser, we have CDN/ADN, we have things called APIs through which we can get a lot of things done. We are really not saying that any kind of server whatsoever, right? Now, for a website, it is true. You really don't need a server. You don't have to go to WordPress where there is a server, there is a backend, there is a DB, things like that. With the JAMstack, this ecosystem, you can manage everything pretty much without any kind of server. But when it comes to an enterprise application, right? The question that I was getting, that someone implemented already, I have implemented in my application. So when it comes to that enterprise application, you may need a server and you may need a database, right? I'll see like how and why exactly you need. Now, before you go there, let's check that why you need this. What is available today in front end? A quick survey says, I have not done that. It is there on website on internet, that 70% of the features that once required a custom backend can now be done entirely on the front end. How? Because for the 70% of the operations, there are API available. Just now we discussed about discuss, right? The commenting. Now think about you if you have to build it, right? Like that, there are plenty of things. Authentication is a very primary thing, right? For any enterprise app development. There are services called Auth0, Netlify Identity, Okta, that provide you all the authentication. You can create your RBAC, role-based access policies, etc., and you can integrate that very well over few API calls from your application. So before you used to write all modules for your authentication authorization, now you cut into that. You go to a provider who takes care of that particular code writing because they have their own teams for doing this. You pay them something monthly or yearly subscription, you get done. It's much lesser than actually a person going through a learning curve and implementing it, maintaining it, fixing it. You want something for the payments, you some payment gateway, you have Stripe, you have Brainty from PayPal, you have Paddle. It's much more customizable one. You don't have to build this one by yourself, right? It's already available through APIs. Headless CMS, we've already spoken about it. Just CMS, no UI. You need an email service, you need a form, right? You can actually get the service very handy through APIs to get the things done. You want some kind of chatbot, like a customer service, like most of the bank websites, we have seen that. You can do all this integration, right? Now think about it, like these are all available through APIs. So even if you are actually not putting your application onto cloud, like software as a service, you can still leverage each of these APIs as long as your application has the ability to run on internet, right? Now what if you go on SaaS, software as a service, right? So there are opportunities are more. There are plenty of things, whatever name I have taken, most of them are available as software as a service. So it means that if you're deploying your application on cloud, on AWS, on Azure, on Google Cloud Platform, these three names I'm taking because they're the front runner. You have all the services, whatever I told, available in cloud, even more than that. So from there, and the best, even you can actually, based on the kind of cloud provider that you're using, the CDN services are part of that cloud provider. Netlify is having its own CDS, AWS is having its own CDS. There are a bunch of services. For example, for your very customized search, you can use Algolia. Authentication, you can use Auth0. Commenting, you can use Discuss. There are plenty of things, right, that you can do. Now I told about 70% case. what you still have to have your own function. What if you are falling into the 30% case? What are you going to do then, right? So that's why you need to understand, in Jamstack paradigm, serverless doesn't mean it is no server. Serverless in most of the cases or all of the cases in Jamstack mean that you are not the person who is managing that server. The server is being managed by somebody else. So far, whatever the 70% case hypothetically I spoke about, those are all about software as a service, maybe a function as a service that is running somewhere. If you have to run a server somewhere, you can still use in your cloud platform infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, function as a service, like Lambda function, and actually make use of it, right? So still Jamstack is saying that you are not the person who is going to maintain and manage the server. Don't take that headache. Rather, use something which is already available or use it on the cloud. So serverless doesn't mean no server. Serverless just mean you are not managing the server. If you are falling into the 30% case where you have to have server management requirement. Now let's see it by this example. I think this will be clear very much. This is where your application sits. Again, in this browser, what runs, there are a lot of other technicalities I take away because we have discussed. What gets loaded in this one, we load pre-built markup from a CDN, right? That is given. That is not there in the picture. Visualize in your mind that it is there somewhere. Now click on a button. You need to call something which is like very specific to your application, right? Maybe you have used Amazon over here, a cloud provider, AWS, and you have a Lambda function. You can call this particular function is from here, which might internally get value from your file storage, which is also in the cloud. Okay. Now you have another functionality. You can go there, probably another cloud provider. And I'm going to the extremities. People don't do it usually. They keep it in the one cloud provider mostly. You can go to another cloud provider, which can go to another DB like a DynaDB or Firebase. These are all running, somewhere on the cloud. Now, best part is you are not managing this. 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 What you are managing through maybe React, through maybe Gatsby, through Git. How are you doing your code? How are you shipping it? How your continuous CI/CD things are happening and things are getting loaded. All other interaction points are served by a server which you don't actually own, right? You don't manage. So that's why the serverless piece is coming. I hope that question that was asked to me is now clear. That how the serverless things comes into picture. This is Jamstack paradigm. If you're breaking this, you're probably not following Jamstack fully, or you're following Jamstack partially. Is up to your requirement completely, right? There is a technological serverless. People already aware of Jamstack means they know like benefit of serverless being here probably we are interacting with AWS. You are probably interacting with GCP. Now the way you interact, you do some of the metadata information for making your API call. All these things are different from AWS to GCP to Azure to any other cloud provider. Now when serverless come into picture, is abstract away all these difficulties. It basically sitting somewhere in between, maybe here, where it give you one API construct through which you can actually code. So when you're coding, you don't have to have a logic like if it is AWS, then do this. If you're GCP, then do this. So it is very seamless, that kind of take care of it. So here is a difference I want to call out. Serverless, when I'm talking now, is a serverless framework I'm talking about. Serverless.com, you can go. So far, before coming to this slide, whatever serverless I was talking about is a serverless architecture I was talking about. So don't mix those two. This is serverless architecture. This is serverless framework, which facilitate certain smoothness by abstracting certain layer for the serverless architecture. Okay. Now let's take another quick example. This is a sales app. I have my browser of my pre-built markup loaded from CDN. Again, I want to do authentication. I can go to Auth0 in cloud, get authenticated. Then I want to get my sales data. I click on a button, it goes to the API gateway. Oh, okay, you want to get a sales data, it goes from this particular DB. I want to search for customer, I can go to this particular search customer API. From there I can go to this DB and it can give me this. Now this entire stuff is running on cloud. This is probably API based, right? So you can think the stuff in that way, right? Now let's take a Gatsby plus Netlify example that I am well versed with. Let's see how this entire thing takes place, right? It's a bit crowded, this slide, but I'll take you through. So developer writes code, developer push code, goes to Git. There is some integration, some workflow that gets triggered whenever you hit that. It comes into Git. It gets triggered and it does a build. I have taken Gatsby as an example. It could be any other site generator. In my thing is like it's a React code. Gatsby generate that. So Gatsby generate a auto build for this whenever it happens. And where exactly it happened? It happened into Netlify environment. Auto build gets generated. Whenever the build is done, what exactly happened? There is a deployment happen to Netlify CDN. Now, at the end, your customer is sitting. Your customer is accessing your app through browser. Whenever customer accessing the app through browser, it gets up from your CDN. On the browser, there is a button where he probably clicked and it required some kind of dynamic data from APIs. And that particular part of your markup probably goes there, fetch it, and get the data. Here, based on your requirement, you may or may not have a headless CMS. If you are building something like a blog, you have to give some kind of interface or some kind of management way to manage those CMS. We'll see that quickly. For that, you have headless CMS. You may not have if you don't have that particular need for a content management, right? So that's a Gatsby plus Netlify example over here. Now let's do it once quickly. I'll just quickly show you a couple of examples. If you're familiar with it, it's great. If you're not familiar, probably you will like these examples. Okay, so I'm showing my browser now. Can just somebody confirm that you're able to see my browser?
Yes, visible.
Yep,
It's
we
visible.
can.
It's visible. We can see it.
Awesome, great. So this is the static Jane website where you have a bunch of stuff already. This is the headless CMS where you can see what are the headless CMS things are available. This is the serverless framework, which does this abstraction layer I spoke about. And here are a bunch of templates available from the Netlify side, which you can use directly. So these are things. Now let's go ahead and see one stuff very quickly. So I have say this particular project. It's called Gatsby All-in-One. What it does is basically it has certain MD files which are my content. Okay, so this contents and all I need to create because like my news site, like my blog site, you can think about it. Now this guy is integrated with Netlify, right? So if I go to settings, I go under integration, I should be able to see Netlify over there. Yeah, this Netlify is kind of configured over here. Now how I would have configured this Netlify, I would have gone to netlify.com, created an account, got into Netlify. I can do a new site from Git. So if you have a Git integration, you click on this GitHub integration. It will ask for the authorization. Once the authorization has been done, it will list out all your repo. You can select one repo and then maybe I'll be selecting this repo for an example. You say that you want to build it from master. If you have a particular build command like yarn build or whatever it is, you can give that and deploy the site. That's all done. So you have one site kind of built, integrated with your Git, that way. So similarly, I have already integrated one site for myself. This is called Panda Block. If I go to this one, and if I go to site setting, what I will see is like this particular site, and this particular site is actually looking for a build from this Gatsby all-in-one. And I have given like, this is the build command because Gatsby built in this way. And please serve the pages from this public because Gatsby actually put all this pre-built markup and everything after building in the public directory. So you can pull it from there. So it runs. And after running, what it does basically, it makes the site alive. So I can go and I can hit there. I can see something kind of running over here. So this is something what my site, for example. Now I have everything set up. So it means now if I write certain, if I make some certain tweak into my markup, which is in the GitHub, and I save it, entire workflow to kick off. A build has to kick off. After build, the deploy has to kick off. Deploy happen into a Netlify CDN, which abstracted away from us, and then given us a URL, a static URL for us, on which the application is being served. Right now, this thing can be done manually just by pushing a code to Git, or can be done through CMS. Right? Let me show you a CMS example. For example, so if you have this Netlify CMS integrated, you have something called admin, a URL. When I go to admin, it's going to give me a UI to pull out this Netlify CMS. This takes a while to kind of give me the initial UI, but it should come up in a second. Yeah. Okay, so it's logging in. Now, can you see it here, one stuff? I have showed you. Okay, did I close my GitHub? Okay, it's here. Okay, so if I go here to my code, and if I go to data blog, you see these empty files over here. And if I go to Netlify now, okay, so these are those MD files, basically my blog entries. So this entire interface I am not writing; it is given by Netlify CMS. Now, if I want to write a new blog, so I go to new blog, cancel. I'll give it some paste. 1, 2, 3. Image is optional. You can write the content in the markdown or the rich text. So test header, and you can give some description about your blog. Then you can put like which category this particular blog is. We'll say shopping, and I may or may not choose an image. I give a tag like shop, and I say this is my feature article. So if you have seen it already over here in this app, there is a feature article already for COVID, right? This app is running like that. Now, if I go over there and I say publish now, let's see what happens. So it's going to publish this particular app. It says that, okay, your entry saved. That means its publishing is done. So let me go to Netlify now for a moment. See this portion. I'll just refresh this guy. There should be a build kicked off already. See here, the build is kicked off already. Why this build is kicked off? If I go to this Gatsby thing, there is no test 1, 2, 3. If I refresh, it would have already pushed it. See here, test 1, 2, 3 MD. The content is exactly what I just now, given is like shopping. So it's got, so the integration is there, this continuous integration is there, things is coming here, the continuous deployment is there because it's getting deployed. Now, once this guy gets deployed, you can see all this log and all, it is going to take some time. I won't wait for that. Once it is deployed and I come back to the site again and I refresh the site, instead of this as a feature article, I'll see the test 1, 2, 3 just now I deployed, right? So this entire cycle is trimmed down to a great extent, and the power is completely in your hand, mostly in your hand, right, for doing things correctly. So it says probably site is alive. Now if I go here and do a refresh, I should be seeing test 1, 2, 3. See here, my feature content is got replaced now with test 1, 2, 3, right? So this is a block kind of experience that we have seen, but in an enterprise application, it will be more about some of the APIs need that you have, you'll be taking from the different cloud services. So I'll go back to my PPT again. So in the ecosystem, this is a picture I've taken from Redpoint. I'm showing my PPT again. This picture is quite vast. I won't go through everything, but it shows like different layers. If you need a backend, if at all you need a backend, there are various things we have already spoken about. Few, if you need a hosting or CDN, I've spoken about Netlify. There are other things are there. Git is, of course, for the source repository. Then there are various API services in that there is a headless CMS, and there are various utility API for your commenting, search, authentication, blah, blah, blah stuff. And then there is a presentation layer already, which having, completely based on your choice. So you can go through this slide whenever I share this PPT with you. Now to end with, I'll just few recap. Enter project is on a CDN. Everything lives on Git. We have modern build tools. If you're using something like Netlify or any other services, they gives it by default. Gatsby has its own build tool for building pre-built markup. Automated builds through the integration point, automated deploys through the integration point, instant cache invalidation that we have already spoken about a bit, right? And then these are a few resources that I have used. I'm sharing with that. Please go through whenever you have time. We'll go to the question answer, and I'll start looking into the Discord channel. But before that, before I look into the channel, is there any question, or we can probably go ahead?
There are some questions, Tapas, in the chat section.
Okay, let me just pull it out. I hope I'm on Discord now. Yeah, it is there.
One question is here, I'll just tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
First one is, how does headless CMS comes into the picture?
Can you ask that question? There's some disturbance in the line. How does?
Yeah.
How does? What is that?
How does headless CMS comes into the picture?
Okay, so headless CMS comes into the picture like when you have to manage your content. Now, this is an example I have given where I have to manage a content because it's a kind of blogging website, or it could be a news website, somebody is building, and there is certain kind of content is over there. Now, the person, maybe an administrator or a content creator, you cannot expect them to be a techie guy. They cannot be. They may not be. So if they are not a techie guy, they probably would be looking for certain kind of UI to manage this content. That's what I have showed through this guy. So the content that I'm creating, the MD files that I'm creating, what Netlify CMS, Netlify headless CMS is giving me a pure entry, so that even if I don't know what an MD file is whatsoever, if I don't know like what is the format, I don't know how to package this MD file for a particular format, because if you see this, I'm expecting this MD file to be in this format, then only my blogging site is going to work. So it means that it has a date, it has a title, category, then is an indentation with a name, then again there is a 3 dot, then there is a content, right? I'm expecting this to be done. I cannot expect a non-techie person to do it. Rather, if I take advantage of a CMS which is going to give me all these infrastructure level pieces, like even this form, through which I can quickly create and I can manage my content. Now, as it's under the same umbrella, like the content management, CDN, integration with your code base, umbrella is Netlify in this example. There could be something else. Everything happens seamlessly. Netlify takes care of it the moment I save these things. That's the reason the CMS is required. If you don't need a content management, for example, if you go to this COVID site, for example, this is also running on Netlify again. I am not managing any content over there. It is calling some of the APIs, getting the data, but entire UI is done with the React and Gatsby, and it is running, on my Netlify. I'm not managing any content. I'm not using any kind of CMS for this app at all. Okay, thank you for your question.
There's another one.
Yeah.
Our template used for JAMstack meets any specific requirement, and is Netlify's role is similar to CMS? Can I make my own template?
Yeah. So Netlify's role, one of the roles of Netlify is CMS. So Netlify has multiple roles to play. One of the role is like Netlify can be integrated with your Git for a continuous deployment perspective. We have seen that in a tab, right? In the Git tab. Now, once the deployment has been done, it has to host it somewhere. So it has its own CDN where he will be taking your content, your pre-built markup, and host it over there. So that's where the CDN come into picture. And again, if you want to manage your pages, you want to manage your content through Netlify, that is where you will be able to use the Netlify CMS. Now, good point you made here by this question. Netlify CMS has integration with various things. It has integration with Hugo. It has integration with Gatsby. It has integration with almost many of those static site generators. So if a static site generators recommend that your content is an MD file, like a markdown file, Netlify has the support. If your static site generator recommends that it is some other file format, Netlify has the support, right? So it's depending on what is the technology for your static site generator. Netlify CMS will work seamlessly for that.
Okay, so I have a very specific question from my side at least. You mentioned Netlify is serverless CMS, right? Or headless CMS for that matter.
Yeah.
So the serverless functions which has another you can say another tool in Netlify.
Yeah.
Serverless function helps you with the headless CMS.
So serverless, I will keep them a little bit different. So CMS in a particular thing is like it's going to manage your content. That's the job. Why it is headless? Because it doesn't have, the UI portion of it is not probably built by Netlify, right? It's giving you a simple form to manage your content, nothing more than that. Now, when you come to the serverless part of Netlify, this is how you should be looking at. You go to any of this particular project, and here you have plenty of things. You have functions. So Netlify provides certain functions. This is like FAS, function as a service. So sending an email, for example, logs, another example, So you can use those functions if your project demands it directly from Netlify while you are deploying things in the Netlify. If you want to manage your users, your identities, you can take the identity services from them, right? The forms is another one that you can take this as a service from Netlify itself. Large media, where you put one image and based on your circumstances, the image will be automatically squeezed and shown. This is the another one. So these services, these are all otherwise you would have implemented at the server side. These are there in an API centric manner or the function as a service manner from Netlify itself. Now, if you are not satisfied with any of this, you can always go with other providers, right? So that's why these things could be little bit, there is a thin line between the CMS and the other side of it.
Okay. There's another question from Neha. Is there any challenges when you go in production with JAMstack?
Okay, so what we have built so far is I won't say it's a kind of pure JAMstack. We have certain pages which are served through JAMstack, because what we know, what we wanted, Neha, is like our customers should not be seeing that cold start. They should be served with the page as soon as possible. After that, if there is a lag for going to subsequent pages, we can probably manage. So maybe 20%, 30% of the pages are pre-built, pre-compiled in the Jamstack era, whereas there is still 60% pages are still in the old era. I would say non-Jamstack era, not old era, not Jamstack era. The problem that I have faced is like if you're starting with an application which is scratch, zero to Jamstacking is pretty easy. I don't see a problem at all. You just need to identify, sitting with your architecture team, that what are the services I need to get from where. But if you are translating a monolithic one to Jamstack, there could be lot of challenges that come in that you have to plan and mitigate. For example, you have to convince your bosses that where exactly the benefit is coming from, and then you should not be jumping the gun like I'm going to take this monolithic app as whole and going to translate into Jamstack in 3 months or 6 months time. It may be possible because volume of that functionalities are less, but in my case I probably going to take another 1 year to translate complete app into Jamstack. But whatever we have done in last 3 months is commendable, right? So that is where I see the challenges with the monolithic app, but with the starting from the existing app, but starting with the scratch is not a problem.
Okay, great. Next question, as I think as a perspective of full stack developer, this is a very important question. From Akshay, he says, where does the traditional backend and database go? How do we manage that here? And where do we write that code? Very important.
Okay. All right, good question. So I'll go back to my favorite slide here. Okay, I'm again on the slide mode, right? So let's talk about database for a moment, right? Let's take that your application uses PostgreDB, right? So you would have written all your schema, your table, and everything structure in the Postgre manner. Now Jamstack is saying, boss, you cannot use an on-prem database. Your database, because I don't want, as a Jamstack philosophy, I don't want you to manage the database. So it means that it has to be managed by somebody else. So now what I'll be doing is like I'll be looking for hosting my database somewhere, or my database equivalent is somewhere hosted already. So I can take from AWS Aurora, which is like goes by almost similar schema philosophy of Postgre. And the portion of the UI or the portion of the functions I want to get Jamstack, I can migrate that portion into the Aurora and get the Aurora subscription from AWS and redirect my APIs to call to that Aurora database from AWS and get my functionality served, right? This is exactly what we are doing. This is exactly why we are actually moving away from maintaining these databases in-house. So in the Jamstack paradigm, your database exists if you have a need. Your file storage exists if you have a need. Your server exists if you have a need. But the only difference is like you don't maintain and manage them, because the maintenance and the management is with somebody, lying with somebody. And that is where probably the criticism of Jamstack comes into picture, where people clearly says it without any boundary that Jamstack is serverless. It is not. If your infrastructure need a server, you need a server. But if you want to go true Jamstack way, you probably don't have to maintain the server. That's what the architecture and the philosophy coming from.
Great. So probably Tapas, just one question from my side.
Yeah.
You mentioned function X and function Y and Z together. So this is server cloud provider A and server cloud provider B. So
Yeah.
Just want to check with you, these cloud providers, can they be considered as microservice concepts or not?
You can actually consider as a microservice concept also. So this is the picture that whatever I drawn here is like very high level, you know. Now each of these pieces I see like there is a need of different sessions. You know, I would love to do it in future. Like once we kind of drill down, you can actually bring in all these philosophies. Now if you see over here, I am saying that I am not taking function y, I'm not accessing function y directly at all. I'm accessing function y from function z. I'm actually calling function z, then function z is calling actually function y. Through that, I'm getting this service out over here. But yeah, whatever you asked is possible. Yes.
Okay, let's jump to the next question by Anoop. Amount of time it requires to deploy, how user experience for user while deployment is in progress.
My personal experience says that some of these CDN providers, that cold start is really taken care. The 0th second that for you to kind of get the first bit, it very minimal. The deployment time. Where exactly I have seen some time which you have to probably discount for, and I have seen it mostly for the blogging kind of website, is the build time. You would have seen it like when I have created test 1 to 3. I had 3 minutes of maybe 1 minute of lag time where I was using that particular site to come alive, even after I published. Right now, that 1 minute of time, if it is your user facing paradigm, it's a problem, because your user is also counted for waiting for that 1 minute that is going to take for your build time. That is mostly happening for this blogging kind of publishing thing. It can happen, right? But that can be mitigated also, that can be made fast also. Somebody mentioned about Cloudflare, that they're using, there are methodology to kind of minimize that cold start over there. But other than that, I think that once you deploy, coming it alive is just very fast in my experience.
Great. Okay, so next question from Neha. If we have a client who needs CMS, then how with JAMstack we can manage this?
So if your client need a CMS, good that you asked this question. So if your client is a CMS, you have to go by a provider. Like the Netlify is one of them. There are other providers like Contentful or a few others. You can go with them. One problem that in the Jamstack ecosystem that I found, and is like, for the CMS management tools are not as robust as what we used to see with things like WordPress, right? If you talk about a CMS tool, the whatever WordPress gives, like, it's very rich. But what like this Netlify and others are giving, for a non-technical person to manage certain things are a bit challenging, and that's where I think that the challenge with Jamstack still lies whenever it comes with content management. But I'm really hopeful that things will change, things will become much more better. Just to give you one quick example, you remember I was filling a form for creating a content test 1 to 3. What if I need a auto suggest box there? What if I need some validation over there? So those UI elements we have to build as a developer. If Netlify is already not providing, Netlify has provided tons of APIs, tons of interfaces. Extending that, I can build a input field, I can build a calendar, I can build whatnot and embed into Netlify CMS for my own custom use. But that comes with a penalty that I have to do it, or I have to search for it. Somebody has already done it in the CMS. But if you go to WordPress and is ecosystem for CMS is much robust, because people have already developed for so many years. Now for Netlify also, we hope so. The way things are going, maybe in next few years, we'll be seeing much reach control in terms of CMS. But to come back to your question is like, yeah, if you need it, you have to probably bank on one of these guys for the CMS purpose.
Okay, cool. Let's move to the next question. Santosh asks, does this understanding valid? All this counts purely under performance optimization. To achieve that, we don't have to rely on browser. Instead, we render the page which is pre-built.
Yes.
And please continue with the next line, which is continuous.
Okay.
Okay, I will continue that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the page to be pre-built. Okay, if we have to pre-build the page, and we want to, avoid browser doing that, because browser takes so much of time trying to contact the APIs, right? So we are telling browser, no, you don't do that. We will do it in the server. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So the page to be pre-built, okay, we need server to be configured in such a way to fetch the data beforehand when the request comes from the browser. Okay. And this is called as server-side rendering. This is achieved with the help of Gatsby. Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Gatsby comes under the whole concept of static site generators.
Yes.
Okay. So Gatsby internally uses things like GraphQL and all these kind of things, right?
Right.
So is this the right way to say this whole thing?
Yes, I think you explained it completely right way. It's perfect. So let's for a minute believe that those MD files, those markdown files, are your data, and for a minute believe that your data store is Git, right? Now, what you use in Gatsby, as it is not a Gatsby session, I could not touch it. What you do in Gatsby, Gatsby has a great integration with GraphQL, right? So each of this empty file, each of this meta information, each of the content of this empty file, you can retrieve using Gatsby query. Those Gatsby query can be embedded into a React component. So when you Gatsby build your UI side of code, it would have already fetched those because those empty files are static in nature. Okay.
Exactly.
And it pre-built everything. Now you can ask another question: what about the other APIs which are not static in nature? Is Gatsby going to fetch those and going to rebuild also? No, that's the dynamic part of your JAMstack that you cannot avoid. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the difference.
Yeah. So to an extent, we can pre-build things, but other things we must have to keep it truly dynamic in
Yes.
real sense only.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. That's why people come back and say, "Hey, JAMstack means it's a serverless." Tell them, boss, yeah, it is, but there is something.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Tapas.
Cool. Thank you. Let's move to the next question.
Okay.
What about the enterprise level application? Like we are more heavy on dynamic content and states. Tapas, just 1 second. Probably, thank you everyone. We'll take one or two questions more after this, and we'll end the session. So Tapas, you can now start.
Yeah, so I think I partially answered that question already. So if your application nature is such that you have to rely on lot of APIs which will dynamically serve the data, you can still go for JAMstack. Think you architect your application in this way, and a very high level I'm talking about. And please feel free to touch base with me on Twitter. We can talk there. So there will be a landing page, right? And most of the cases that landing page can be served intelligently with almost static data, or a portion of it is fetching the dynamic data. Now from there, once you drill down, once you go to subsequent things, you probably have much more dynamicism inbuilt in your application. So now how you can jamstack this application? This first page you build in a jamstack way. You built in a way that where things are probably statically built. Most of the things are statically built. One or two places of that pages are making those APIs call is fantastic, is fine, but still put that in a Jamstack way. Put it front. Put it in the CDN so that it can be served very fast. From there, the subsequent pages can make any APIs call. No harm in that. It has to be that way. There is no other way. We cannot go ahead with. So that's why I'm saying that whether you go full Jamstack, you go partially Jamstack, or you go no Jamstack, that's your choice. I am doing partially Jamstack, for example. I've given an example. Go with that way. I mean, it's perfectly fine.
Cool. Okay, let's take one last question from Akshay, and then we'll wrap up. Probably for all others who have posted question, we are very sorry we can't take any further. You can post your message
Will I
directly
be
on
able
Discord
to answer
server.
the question on Discord after this
Right.
call? Okay, I'll do that.
Right. That would be possible. And if you can reach out to Tapas directly on Twitter, he would be happy to answer all the questions.
Sure.
Let's go with the last question from Akshay. My understanding after going through the session and reading comments, I have understood that most of us are using part of this architecture, at least in backend, because in most of the cases, backend or DB is non-maintained in-house. This is why so many of us have said we are already doing it. So what's your take on this, Tapas?
Yes, if it is not maintained in house, you are probably already doing it. Only part probably in some of this application is getting missed out is two parts. One is like the content that you are serving in your UI side, they may not be pre-built today. You should be looking forward for the opportunity of pre-building with the technologies that we have spoken about. And the second portion that could be missing is like they are not being served from a CDN. the HTML and CSS. Remember the earlier slide where I just spoke about the difference between a traditional versus JAMstack. One of the paradigm is like you're serving your pages from CDN than a monolithic server where it has to do this round trip from server to fetch the required pages on demand. Instead of that, you're serving the previous thing from CDN. I think that part is probably missing, which we need to kind of cover up based on our needs.
Great. Great, Tapas. Thank you so much for giving us so many thoughts around JAMstack and a great introduction to it. Probably it would help a lot of guys or a lot of folks around. Right. Thank you so much. And
yeah, thank you very much. Yeah,
probably the audience can connect you directly on your Twitter account or the
Yes.
Discord server for any further questions or any other follow-ups. Jaswant?
Awesome. So I'll share this slide sometime later. Please reach out to me on Twitter. We'll talk definitely. We'll learn from each other. Thank you very much.
Great. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Oops.